So recently, for anyone who's watched Marvel with the likes of Quantumania, I have actually noticed that some of the characters that these films have presented have been more arrogant and obnoxious and nothing like the heroes we began with. The biggest examples of which are actually Cassie Lang and She-Hulk in this conversation. And what I want to do today is primarily analyze these two characters and why they're so terrible amidst Marvel's mediocre era that everyone seems to hate nowadays. It's a baffling decision that our new heroes are just becoming this way when we started out with Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. In the case of Tony, he did have this arrogant attitude and still had that sort of personality throughout the series, but he grew from that and we got to see what really mattered in his heart, what he was actually fighting for, whether it be for the world or his family or just trying to do better for humanity, where Captain America always had this heart of gold, trying to fight for what is right, being a role model for most of the team and a skilled leader at doing so. That we constantly were given heroes like them and Hulk that had these tragic backgrounds that we actually understood that made us love them as heroes of that very stories, where now it just doesn't seem the case for the most part. A part where they're beefing up their female superheroes and diminishing their male superheroes in the terms of their characters. The direction that several solo stories have gone right now have not shown much from what we actually wanted out of them, and frankly the newer ones are just making it hard to connect with its audience as time goes on. Of course, it's not like it's all of them that I don't like anymore. I only said it pertains to both the case of Cassie and Jennifer, but all of them still lack this kind of shine that we started with over a decade ago. The ones we already knew previously, like Sam Wilson and Doctor Strange, are still okay in some cases for the most part, but they still lack the sort of charm that we knew, as with what happened when Sam donned the Captain America persona, and well, in the case of Hawkeye, is just teaching a newer version for a newer generation that doesn't really live up to that very humble beginnings. Because in the case of Ant-Man, we have a character that we've already known that pertains to Scott being his own daughter as we see grown up. I mean, the audience experienced things through Scott's perspective when she first came out looking like another person in Endgame and then another person again in Quantumania, which still doesn't make any sense and serves as a disrespectful gesture for what they originally built in that story in that regard. Because not to serve any disrespect to the newer actress, but she doesn't have the same relationship or chemistry that Emma Fuhrmann did with the smaller scenes that she had. The emotion she poured out to see her father 5 years after the fact of everything disappearing, where in the case of this very movie, it completely erased all of those emotional connections. Because as we all know right now, the story of Quantumania is completely flawed and it's not a very good movie to begin with. Not even as a typical Marvel movie in that regard, where they executed the wrong concepts with the wrong characters and that is solely expressed on the daughter of Ant-Man. A lot of the elements of this particular film takes away from what made his series of films special by removing the important side characters that were there all the way through, only serving as their grand launching pad. In the previous two films, we had a young Cassie who loved her father and loved his work as the hero Ant-Man, where now after coming back in her life, saving the world from complete destruction and becoming a public icon, she kind of hates his guts. Well, not exactly, because he is a celebrated figure in the public where he doesn't actually take a look at the more important issues that arises in humanity according to her opinion, like protesting something that we don't even know about, a political activist who shrinks down cop cars left and right fighting the good fight for whatever is going on that we do not even know about. Where when you think about it, this doesn't make any sense at all for her to be acting this way after what we saw in Endgame, once again showcasing the belated happiness she felt for having her dad again, where you don't really feel that this is the same Cassie, in the story sense other than the actor sense of course, berating him for not helping out at all with whatever she wants to protest, plus shrinking down a cop car for no other reason, especially for someone who had a stepfather who was a cop, where once again, as we talked about earlier, this movie just did not want to bring up that they removed him, her mother, who is also Scott's ex-wife also, and his friends from the previous movies just to focus more on Kang, so that they could probably portray the main themes of this totalitarian figure and rise up against in the worst possible way, where she doesn't get any of that at all. She is not Ant-Man's daughter in this film, she is a girl parading as Ant-Man's daughter who does fluff all to help random people who she just met. Because we see throughout this film that she wants to help wherever she can in any capacity in any other universe like the quantum realm, where she knows little to nothing about and dies like she understands what these people are being oppressed by someone, and how her father just never did enough, which does not make any sense at all for her very character, where Scott did everything for his very daughter's safety as he always cared about her, and the trailers just made it seem like he was trying to get some part of that back for him, where in her case she just forgotten about everything that has happened up to this point, especially what he did in Endgame to save everyone, that included her in that picture, from coming back and preventing the snap Part 2. It is truly mind-boggling to think that this is how that they should write Cassie in this way, when nothing from before previously warranted that ever happening in the first place. Each new character they try to present tries to remove the importance about why we love them and cut straight to the chase in order to give to the next big event. They want more of the endgame money makers as fast as possible without any regards for the story of the characters who do nothing but encourage people to not be a dick. Like that scene in Ant-Man where she was with MODOK was actually the pinnacle of modern writing for anything. As much as they did to ruin Darren Cross in this film, Cassie is what put the nail in the coffin for him with that not being a dick line. A line that sort of helped him against Kang in the end and got him killed ultimately. Like, did the writers actually forget that she was the one being a dick just 30 minutes ago to her own father? Because clearly in this movie she is definitely in no position to say any of this if that is the case, making no real motivational moment that could actually help their characters in any way throughout her story. The chemistry she has with anybody in this film lacks any real substance to it compared to a person who had like 1 minute of screen time and that was virtually it. Where somehow they didn't realize this fact, releasing this movie to be the biggest of the year but failing in the most spectacular way that is similar in the case of what She-Hulk did. Because as most people know with She-Hulk, she is the most hated Marvel character on television at this point, for things like the infamous scene she had with her cousin Bruce Banner, the one where she describes how superior she is at controlling her emotions to the tragic character of the Hulk.
So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
And setting this up with no real context to her character and background in the first episode is actually grounds for disappointment and unlikability. Most of these newer characters display a level of arrogance that I could never expected about 10 years ago, to be Mary Sues that solve every problem that they have and carry no weight with them at all or their overall stories. For the most part of She-Hulk, problems really do get solved with relative ease in each episode being a comedy series that the writers didn't actually know how to write courtroom drama for some reason, where every action that is performed makes little to no sense and is one that actually strains their animators to work on insignificant scenes that the public just definitely really wanted in a big green meanie who just twerks on screen. The focus on her character has made the others suffer that we, the audience as fans of the MCU, have witnessed over the years becoming shells of their former selves in the case of Hulk and Abomination. She remains for the most part of this series so self-assured, so arrogant that she refuses to grow as a character until reality hits her at the very tail end of that series. She complains about a lot of things and then goes ahead and does that very thing. There is just nothing that she can do in this series that could make her a compelling, likable character because they don't really attempt at doing that. Yes, you may include the basic foundations of her character like interacting with us by breaking the fourth wall, but she is doing it in such an obnoxious way that does a disservice to the entire Hulk family. The earlier cartoons with She-Hulk had a much better job at portraying her very character that is more likable than this modern big budget series could ever do. At no point have you ever shown us that she is worthy of having the same praise, that she should be respected in this pantheon or be involved with people like Daredevil because you wanted to do a comedy series, which is exactly what the MCU is at this point. One big joke that doesn't do anything creative anymore and allows their characters to be complete shells of their former selves. And this is all just a clear problem with their writing, that above everything else in Marvel that is terrifying, the writing for the most part is why these stories suck. Without any room for good quality, everything will suffer as a result, where no matter how good or bad someone is at performing or acting in their story, that will always be affected by the blatant awfulness that makes us hate them rather than love them. And it's the same case for other characters as well, within the likes of Thor, that turned him into a mediocre shell of his former self that erased any arc that was being built up previously. Like in this case, they actually increased his goofiness and likability for his comedic aspects that makes him more unlikable than likable, where he doesn't really balance out his character from before and we are not warranted that same character that we love. It's sidelining all of what they previously built to rush in these new heroes and new concepts that don't really add much to the stories and the overall arc of the multiverse saga, and I hardly understand that. How you can mess up your own past is completely beyond me and beyond all reason for any of this to continue at all. And this is all happening at a time where now we are witnessing a time of shakeup for Disney and Marvel in these cases, and what will result of this has yet to be seen, because if they do continue what they have been doing right now, I believe that Marvel will ultimately die out. Now, I can't really see that happening right now because of how big they are and how people will always be invested in these stories to some degree, but it has come to the point where people have realized that after Endgame, the case for continuing Marvel has truly diminished, concluded well in the eyes of the public who wants something new that the studios just failed to see, resulting in that inevitable fate that all series would face eventually. And then, of course, you have these newer modern characters that look down upon everything and act on high arrogance, cementing your pathetic demise for not understanding what people wanted out of enjoying such things. And if this keeps going on, it will all fall to a pathetic whimper in the end, like the rest of us will face eventually. So that's all I have to add now. I'm all done, so goodbye.